I was ordained in 2002 for the Diocese of Arlington. And prior to that, I grew up mostly in the Washington, D.C. area and attended university at the University of Virginia. Then I worked for a few years in the business and healthcare consulting industries. And during that time, while working in downtown DC, discerned vocation to the priesthood. And I studied for the Diocese of Arlington, and I'm still currently a priest of the Diocese of Arlington and have served now for almost 22 years in the church. I was born in the United States, but I did all of my grade schooling in the Philippines. My parents are immigrants to the United States from the Philippines. So we actually lived in Manila during my grade school years. My parents really instilled in me a very deep concern and love for the poor, because oftentimes our car would be surrounded at traffic lights with street children. And my parents always used to remind my sister and me that could easily have been us, just depending on, in a certain sense, our place in the world and how our lives could have turned out. And so my mom always said to be very, very grateful and thankful for your gifts and to be always mindful of those who are less fortunate than you are. And that just stayed with me throughout the rest of my childhood and certainly into adult life. And so when the opportunity arose to do preaching on behalf of the poor, it seemed like a real natural fit for me. The spirit behind the work had always been something that was very much a part of my worldview growing up. I think the best way to answer the question is I have been to places in the United States that I would never have ever envisioned going to, what I consider to be very remote places, and meet the local Catholic communities of faith, these parishes where we're sent. To me, has been some of the most inspiring part of the work, in the sense that, I operate in a certain world like everybody else does, but then have to kind of be pulled out of that and then go to a place where there are other believers living the faith in their particular cultural milieu has been really fantastic. I've been in North Dakota, I've been in Wyoming, I've been in parts of Arkansas, places I'd never ever seen. I know the places, but to actually engage these very faith-filled communities who are very generous with our apostolate, to me has been the most inspiring part, just because they accept a priest for a weekend who they've never met, have no real connection with. And by the end of the weekend, when you leave, you feel like you've made a few friends in the community. And some of them have wanted to keep in touch beyond the time I was just there for, a couple of days. So to me, that's really inspiring to actually see the response that we get and the welcome that we get from our fans and our friends. St. Thomas More, because he's the patron saint of my diocese, but he's also the patron saint of lawyers and politicians, which constitute a significant portion of the number of people who live in the Washington, D.C. area where I'm from. And as a moral theologian, I spend a lot of time teaching in the area of conscience and conscience formation. And St. Thomas More has been regarded as a martyr for conscience, even by the secular press. I like to say that he was a martyr for the truth, his conscience, which is simply there to perceive it. But someone who could have easily acquiesced to the immense political and social pressure put on him, but stood strong in the faith and in the church, died as a martyr for it, who is regarded by many to be one of the great saints of the 16th century. So St. Thomas More would be one of my favorites. Also, because he speaks Old English, I think that would be really remarkable to have a conversation with someone who speaks Old English, sort of like Shakespearean type of English. I think that would be really, really interesting too. You never know where the Lord is going to put you and what he's going to ask of you and what the church is going to require of you in your work. I would say don't assume anything and just be open to the possibilities that God is placing before you. I think sometimes we have plans and visions about what we want our lives to be, but as St. Jose Maria Escriva used to say, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Fundraising aside, which is important, obviously, but it's actually calling Catholics in our country to a dimension of discipleship that I think often gets overlooked, and that is the missionary dimension of the church. It's very easy for people to get really insular and very narrow in their worldview because they're concentrating on their life, their community, their cultural and social environment. But when a cross-Catholic missionary comes to that parish and opens up for them this other world that's out there, brothers and sisters that we have in the Lord who live in subhuman, impoverished conditions, and our obligation to those persons, not out of mere duty, but out of love. I think it's important to sort of broaden their perspective on what the church is and where the church is. So, we've been very blessed with the fundraising dimension. I mean, it's very much a success story. But I often think that on these missionary outreach priest opportunities, what often gets overlooked is the fact that just our mere presence in that community, even for 48 hours or however long we're there, is already witnessing to the faith and to the mission of the church to be evangelical and missionary in spirit. I think that alone is a huge contribution to the life of that parish. So besides the money, I would say that would definitely be right up there with, I think, one of the most important things that we do.